Hi, I'm Mike Woods. I'm a senior lecturer in game art, and this is
Bradley Davis, a lecturer in immersive technologies here at the University of Staffordshire.
Welcome to Developer Mode. So, I don't know whether I need to kind of explain what I'm about to do. I'm going to do some stuff that you perhaps don't know very much about, I guess. So the main thing about this, I was having a conversation with Jen about how it was much better in the old days. It was much better in the old days, and we used to have a lot more fun. Basically doing stylized texturing, and then basically doing stylized texturing, and we used to have our kind of like workflow, and all that's changed with something like Substance Painter. So these days we have to follow a very kind of like typical path, doing high poly to low poly baking and that kind of thing. So it takes sculpture and things like that. One of my favorite things to do was to basically paint like rock stuff, like stylized rock things. And I wanted to try and recreate that today. So we do have some options within here. We can create tiling materials basically. Normally we'd have our high poly and low poly, but we're just going to start with something that's just a square, just a tiled square. I love the way this starts off broken as well. So that's just stuff that we don't need. So these bumps, it sorts itself out eventually. And this is all default based on that kind of sample. So what I want to do is just kind of try and set some stuff up. I can leave all this, the rest of this stuff in. So we got a conversion from height to normals there. We're going to be painting in height, so we're just going to be doing black and white stuff. Keeps things simple, but it's like the old days, painting in black and white, basically. And we've got a base material as well. I might just change this just very quickly because it always annoys me. You start seeing the roughness, basically. So at the moment, it's going to be shiny, but you can't really tell at this point. I don't want it to be shiny because it's going to be rocks and it's going to annoy me. So what I'm going to do very quickly is just add a little bit of a fill layer. So what I want to do is set up the height very specifically. So we've got generic material here, but I just want to nerf the height a little bit. So we've got our height. Oh, I am getting old. My eyes are not good. I can kind of see it in the distance. It's fine. So we've got our height and we can adjust that. So I'm just going to set it to like maximum low point. So the midpoint's where it was, and now it's going to be at maximum low.
Why do we want to do this?
Because I want to start painting some of this stuff in. And the easiest way of doing it, again, going back to Photoshop, is actually to add a mask to what this is. So we've got our value, which is kind of up and down. But we can mask out certain areas. So we can kind of push in or pull back, basically. So we can add our mask, and it goes back to where it was, basically. But from that point, we could just start drawing in. Now this is set up in a very specific way as well. So it's got like if I manage to select the right thing, go on the brush, hopefully this is going to work. So we can draw in and it's going to recess everything, which is quite nice by default. And then we can keep drawing in sort of random shapes, whatever it's going to do. Hopefully one day in a minute, it's going to be a stone. But that's kind of like your baseline for that. And obviously it's very severe at the moment because it's just kind of like maximum low at this point as well. So if I just have a look through here. So one of the things I don't want it to do is affect the size. I just want it to be like a nice alpha. And we can have some flow in there as well so that it picks up a little bit of pressure sensitivity. This is an old Wacom, but it still works. You know, it still picks up that pressure. And also, if I can find it, where are you? So the alpha at the moment, that's the shape of what this is actually projecting. It's quite nice and soft now because of what I changed with the actual scaling of it. It's going to maintain a size and it's relatively soft. One of the things I wanted to do potentially was to change this because it's got a bit of a weird kind of like curve to it. And I want to add a curve later on. So if I do a search for cone, I can find, hopefully, a cone. And that's just going to have much more of an even linear cross-section.
So can I just check, Mike, sorry, before you go on? In my world, alpha is a layer of transparency.
Yeah, that's kind of what this is as well. So it's going to be the shape of the brush. And obviously we have plenty of different things that this could be. So it could be like that kind of thing, or a cross shape or whatever it is. I'm just going to keep it simple. We don't need anything fancy for rocks, basically. But what we do need is to be able to like basically draw out a shape that eventually becomes this kind of like random pattern potentially. Because this is all about fun. I don't care about doing these things properly. This session is supposed to be about fun. It's not about like proper workflows and things like that. It just goes back to the basics of what we used to do in Photoshop, where we're kind of doodling along and we do a little bit of filtration to it and whatever. So we get some shapes and kind of zoom out, and that's what it actually is at the moment. And it will just kind of tile. Very abstract, very simple. But you kind of get to that point, I suppose, eventually, hopefully, that it turns out okay. So the other thing about this as well is that you can kind of see that we've got some spacing in there. I might just leave that in and see how it comes out, to be honest. We could have changed the spacing. People get super obsessed about this stuff these days. In the old days, I had to change the spacing just to get Photoshop to work. But these days, it's kind of fine. Hopefully, PCs are pretty good. But in the next little while, we'll kind of refine it, I suppose. So at the moment, I've just got all these kind of like recesses. And one of the other things that's annoying me quite a lot is the fact that you can kind of see that I've got light from below. And that kind of sense of the visual is quite difficult as a result of that. I'm going to forget which button I need to press. I guarantee this is not set up correctly. So is it a shift and a right click? There we go. Okay. So we can change the light direction around so that I would typically want to make sure I've got top left to bottom right or something like that. So I know that this is going to be recessed, so there should be a shadow on that top left-hand side. And I can work with that. Now, past this point, we could do a number of things. So I've very specifically set up this kind of linear angle so that I can adjust it. And we can adjust it in a couple of different ways. So I could do this in, what buttons have I got on this thing? Right click, okay. I can use a filter and I could add in something called a, if I type in curve, because that's the thing that I really want, but that Substance Painter doesn't have that at the moment, unfortunately. But Photoshop does, and all the other programs that are associated, like Substance Designer, have a curve. What this has is similar, but it's just kind of a little bit less kind of functional, I suppose. So this is kind of interesting because it's kind of creating this canyony effect. And it's because it's adjusting that linear element and turning it into a curve. So this one's round. This one would be pinch. So it's kind of pulling it together a little bit, which is kind of what I want, but it might be a little bit too much, or I need to paint in a little bit more to get the result that I'm looking for, basically. This is one thing that I could do. So I'll perhaps start with this and see how it goes, I suppose. We've got ease in as well, and we've got the ease out is the other way. So either pinch or kind of like ease in or something like that would probably be a good start to this. Now, you might see that we're still we're not really creating like the intersection you might expect from a rock at this point. And we could go back and paint some stuff in, so I could be a little bit more heavy-handed, I suppose, and make sure of the job. But that might be a little bit too intense. I don't know whether I've got my size. It is allegedly doing it. It's just, maybe just needs a little bit more reinforcement to get to where it is. But we'll see what else we can do with it before that point. And I might want to be a little bit more subtle about it as well. I don't know. So another filter, and I'm going to do two of these, but they're basically the same thing. So in Photoshop, one of the main filters that we probably would have used was something called minimize and maximize. And it kind of adjusts the relationship between typically like black and white. So it also works with transparency as well. So it will either sort of expand out or contract in depending on the value, effectively. What we have in Painter is something called slope blur. With slope blur comes great responsibility, more than anything else. So by default, it's kind of like a little bit noisy, and you will maybe see that. But that's kind of part of the functionality that I want. I quite like that, because I can then kind of maybe just blur it a little bit, and then we get this kind of like random lumpiness, basically. And we started to maybe get something that could be a little bit more functional overall. And obviously, we can adjust the intensity. For this one, I think it matters which way we go, but it will matter when we start to put the next one in. So let's do the same thing again and add in my slope layer. But this one doesn't want to be noisy. It wants to just use the base thing that I've been working on. So we've got this concept of the previous input, which basically just means whatever's below on the stack there. And we could basically adjust this to do a little bit of squeezing, but it's not squeezing. So maybe it needs to go to the minus. But once it's gone to the minus, we should be able to push it a little bit further. Now, some of this is going to be, I think, the relationship that I've set up. So whatever I've painted perhaps is not enough. He says, hopefully. I was doing this earlier just to make sure that everything was kind of working out. So I don't know whether I just need to be like really heavy-handed about it or whatever, but I need to potentially, let's just reduce this to maybe 0.3 or something like that. Try and get a shape that works.
So when you're drawing like this, how much are you caring about the left-hand side where you're painting the tiled version, and how much are you caring about the individual?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, is that it's because we're dealing with height, then we probably need to make sure that we're dealing with the 3D nature of it, I suppose. But as well as that, quite often it's easier to work in 2D. So you can kind of flick between the two of them. I want to see this as like a preview, I suppose, more than anything else. Because this is kind of like you're looking at it and it's the real world where you've got light on top and dark on bottom. This one's more a question of what's it doing there, basically. So we can kind of build up these shapes. So maybe I don't know how I've managed to be so light-handed with it earlier. And I've probably got too many shapes, I don't know.
Well, what's the phrase? A good workman blames their tools. I think that might be wrong, but it's close enough.
Well, yeah. These things are different. It's like I've not used this PC before, so I don't know what it does. Like it's going to have some niggly little problems, most likely. Let's just blur you a little bit. Well, what are you doing? So we can expand out a little bit from that and try and create, and this is not set up the right way as we apply, which is good. Well, I say the right way, it's just not my way. We can maybe blur this out a little bit as well, just to kind of try to create something that's just like these kind of like lumpy shapes, I suppose. Yeah. And we can kind of maybe work with this to some degree, I suppose. Now, there's a lot of balance. It's a bit of a balancing act with this, like the intensity of this versus the amount of blur, just to try and get the right kind of shapes, because you can really crank this up and then really blur it out as well. And where the correct outcome is, who knows? It's always a little bit of guesswork. I should have written down some values or something like that. That would be smart.
I like this way. We get to see the inner workings of Mike this way.
Oh my God. Okay. Now, the good thing about this as well, at the moment, you can probably see that we've got lumpiness on the sides, and then we've got a relatively flat surface as well. So if I'm a little bit more subtle about this, I could take the flow down, so I'm drawing less. I was going to point out as well, like just like in the old days with Photoshop, we would be using black and white, and we'd be switching between the two, and the keyboard shortcut is exactly the same. So when you kind of like switching between these two things, you can add back in, or you can remove basically based on just pressing X, and it keeps things way more simple, because things got a lot more complicated with Substance Painter when they brought in this the height painting stuff and how it dealt with that, and the dynamic range, and okay, let's just keep height separated from I'm losing out. What's my shortcut? I don't know.
This is the problem. You talk about shortcuts and then it all goes from your head.
Yeah. What am I on at the moment? So I can pull back some of that shape. But what I wanted to do, which is kind of create some lumpy noisiness, basically. So if I just kind of like noodle it around, I'm not doing anything special with this. Well, I'm just kind of like noodling in. And if you look at the mask that I'm actually painting, it looks kind of more interesting there, right? If I just turn all that stuff off, much art is happening right there. But it's just a matter of making sure that everything is in place and correct, I suppose, generally. So we can noodle this stuff in. If I've got the right values in, we can put some random stuff in. You start getting cracks and like just general kind of like breakup on the surface and that kind of thing. And this is exactly the kind of stuff that you'd want to maybe leverage a little bit, because we are painting with that height, so it is a little bit lumpy. So progressing from that, what I wanted to do was just to very quickly throw some stuff in. So it becomes easier to see what's happening a little bit when you start to put in something like the ambient occlusion. So we get some shading across the surface and what would be the edge wear. So curvature for that. So if I just add in a fill, we've already got the height, which is pretty cool. We could maybe yoink that normal as well. So what I'm going to start to do is also, so I've got a random layer here. That can be my finalized height. So I'm building this stuff up very slowly. What do I want to call that? Not cracks. I want to call that stone shapes. And then all that's feeding up to here, but I've got to make sure that I'm basically just pulling this one kind of like element in. So wherever, can't see where my little, it's there, isn't it? Right, so we've got our range of stuff. I just want the height on this because that's what that's going to be. And then we can have a look in the layers and go very specifically to the height and say, let's change this, because the blending mode by default is linear dodge, or as I've come to call it, lodge. But basically, you as a programmer will know that you need to, you can use like values in different ways. So all we're doing is adding. So when it does this kind of mathematical process, all it's doing is adding stuff. But really, in reality, we're working from a -1 through to 1 space. So when we add minus,
it's all normalized.
Yeah, well, it goes down. That's the thing. People get confused about that, and I still work from 0 to 1 in my head, and that goes wrong. But I want pass through for this, and that just means that it's basically just literally handing me the height for that, and as a result of that, I can set an anchor point. So that's going to be the height. This one is the conversion to the normal. So we can put another anchor point in there, and that would be the kind of like yoink for the normal, basically. And we can use that up here for a number of different things. So the height is usually the thing that you need to pull in a lot of the time. Normally we'd have it from the bake, but in this particular instance, we're going to have to basically pull it in the other way, the more complex way. So at the moment, we've got a base color for this. This needs to be my AO, so I know what I'm doing. And apparently we're looking in fonts. That's not going to help. If I do a search for ambient occlusion, I think both of these work. Have a little moment in my head. I'm going to choose one and see what happens. So we can choose a filter, and basically what I want it to do is we can pull in both the height and the normal, hopefully, he says. So we've got anchor points, so we can pull in the height and we can pull in the normal. And hopefully it's going to do something. It doesn't look like it's doing a lot at the moment. There are definitely some problems with this, because I have to remember where it's taking things from. So height definitely needs to come from height. that did something. And because of that weird like -1 to 1 range, we need to go back and normalize and make sure everything's 0 to 1. So we can need to auto level it. So we've got 0 to 1 now. And the other one should be okay. So the height to normal should be perfectly fine. It's pulling in the base color at the moment, which is not fine. It does need to be the normal. And we should be able to go back up here, as this is where it's challenging my eyes. What am I doing? I need to maybe adjust the height, depth, or possibly the radius. Have like, can't remember which way around it needs to go, like a low radius or probably a high radius and a low depth. We get more of a like even like shading, I suppose. So it's highlighting some problems because I've not quite got cracks in the right place at the moment. But what we can do from that is move on and maybe add some extra detail. So let's add in our edge wear. We can do the same thing again. We're going to be like basically pulling stuff in. So I want in here, what do I want? I want to maybe just leave that the way that it is and use a mask. So we can have white in there. Again, there's too many ways of doing this. I could just set it up to do the base color potentially.
So this was supposed to be the simple way.
Well, it's more the fun way, the way that sparks joy, because once you set all this stuff up, you've got free range over what happens. So I can start to, let's not do that. We can start to do some other things. So I want to fill this with the height. That's what I want to do. It's going to let me. Are you going to let me? Let's ignore you for a minute. I bet you're not. Now, this is what happened to me earlier. Let's remove the mask. Are you going to let me could just have a fill? Maybe that would work better as well. If I fill this with, there we go, the height. We've got the height from that at the moment, and then we can apply a bit of a curvature to it. That's more filter. Default would always come from a bake. I've got the wrong thing again because my eyes are going. It's not going to be a filter, is it? It's going to be a generator. This is what happens when you have old eyes and
the top, right?
Yeah. Go away. And now I've lost, apparently, my... Can I have that back? Properties generator, please. Right. Curvature.
There we go.
There we go. Now, again, this is all set up to auto do stuff, which is completely blank at the moment. So it's always useful. But we can set up micro details. So we can tell it to look for certain things. So we've got normal and we've got height. So once more, we can add in anchor points for our height and make sure we're actually pulling the height. And with that normal as well, an anchor point for the normal. Make sure it's actually pulling in the normal and not the whatever. So we're starting to get something there as well. But these curvature settings are dubious at best, shall we say. So we could pull all this stuff down. I think mostly the problem will be, if I just have a look at the mask. So this is what my mask is creating at the moment based on these particular values, but we can kind of like try and dial it in a little bit. It's just a question of how much of this stuff you actually want.
So why do you find it easier to do this bit with the mask rather than with the...
You can do it both ways because you could just plug it directly into the base color as well. Generally, I do forget which way round is probably better. I mean, allegedly maybe a mask because when you're working with black and white, as we are at the moment, we can very quickly switch between black or white, and we can paint if we needed to over the top of everything, which gives us more control. And that's probably the argument, I guess, overall. But we start to get some edges I can't even see. So this color is probably perhaps too bright as well. So if it was, or I'm nerfing something else somewhere else, there we go. So at the moment, I think my AO is not multiplying or something. Multiply, please. There we go. So it should multiply in some shading, and then we get some extra stuff literally on top. So it's starting again to look kind of where it needs to be. Part of the problems that I've got at the moment are going to be related to the shapes that I've been painting more than anything else. So maybe we could fix those. Don't know. I'm going to doubt myself. Let's try and find, where are you? Flow. Flow's low, and we've got some control. It just means that we can start painting some of this stuff back in potentially, and it will adapt. So we could fill in some of these gaps if we don't like the gaps. And then from this point, we're starting to create just blocks of stuff, and we can organize it how we want it. And we can kind of see what's happening with it a little bit better, potentially. Some of this stuff is a little bit noisy. I mean, we could, I don't know whether I need to maybe adjust this curvature just a little bit. I don't know whether a levels is going to help necessarily, but we could pull that back a little bit. So just maybe just see some of the outside edges of it. The slope blurs that we've got as well. So maybe we could remove some of the intensity of that. And the curvature itself is a little bit, again, these are the values that we get, but we can adjust it to just blur back just a little bit, so we get something that's a little bit more sensible overall. So back in the old days, we would just be using this as an indication to start doing some painting, basically. So the joy from this should come from just having sorted this out to then being able to adapt to fill certain things in or remove them, so you could increase the size of that crack and really figure out what kind of shapes do you want, because this is going to be a little bit too deep, I suppose, and wide for the kind of crack that this is going to be. And we can build it up gradually overall. So it's about sculpting at the end of the day. So this is Substance Painter, technically a two-dimensional program ish, but you can try and sculpt with it to a degree. And that is where the fun comes in more than anything else. It doesn't take very much once you've sorted it out. Now, I'm not going to say that I've done a perfect job of creating some of these shapes, but it sets the tone, I suppose. Right, what else do you want to do? If I just very quickly just yoink that one up there. So we could have like a stone extrusion as well. And all I'm doing is I'm going to take the same thing again, but if I just pull back on this, could fill in just black, remove that stuff. But I've got all the same settings that's going to be on here. But instead of having a height that goes into the recess, we can push it out this time around. That just means that we can paint in over the top. It's going to let me. And hopefully, we're going to start painting outwards with some interesting shapes as well. So whether or not this is the right kind of shape or whether it's the right kind of extrusion for you, I don't know. We can start building that up.
And all of this is still like 2D, right?
And it's basically just a mask. So I've got two layers which are effectively just masks. And it's just, I painted a thing. And it means that I can come back to it and repaint it if I really wanted to. I can adjust my height because this is all set up in a not completely procedural manner because I'm painting, but at least I've got some sort of measure of adjustment over the top of it. And I can try and build this in a couple of different ways, whether it's going to be with the height, try and see how it interacts with the shape. It might not do the thing that I wanted to do necessarily. But it will create something that might be at least vaguely interesting. And we can force it a little bit. So you could smudge it out as well. I can make sure that I've got my flow for this. And don't have a size on there. And it is a relatively soft brush, but let's just bump up the contrast on it. It just means that we can start to smudge it out a little bit, and maybe it will create more interesting shapes as a result of that, because we can start to blend a little bit more, really pull this stuff out, and it will fit to the edge potentially, or we can try and force it into a direction depending on what is on the underlying surface of it a little bit more. If we do blend over that side, you start to see that you get like interesting little shapes where you've got little lines coming up, like concavities and things like that. So it's just about building some complexity out of it more than anything else. This is where the joy comes in, right? This is where the fun comes in. You might have to obviously get your sort of your art lead's approval before you start finalizing anything. But this is kind of like your overarching approach. And we could do this again. Don't know how much time we've got left, but let's call this the last thing that we do. If you remove that as an element, and this one can go back inwards again. You can figure out how much damage do you want to do based on that setting. Or we can paint back in. So we can say, okay, I want a crack in there. I'm going to try and work with the shapes. Well, I'm failing miserably, I think, at this point, but kind of work with the shapes that are already there. And again, whether or not that's just too severe, I might pull that back, because it's not supposed to be a mega damage, completely smash the stone kind of crack. It's just going to be an extra kind of like feature over the top of it. We can put that wherever you want it. That's one of those extra little features that you can just kind of like start to paint in and go, oh, wow, I like that, because there was some tension between these two rocks and then it cracked all the way through. And you can be very random about it as well. I'm not doing anything. I'm doing what is called noodling, if you've heard that term before. Just to, I've got a general direction I want to go in, but then also kind of like moving in random shapes.
It's really interesting to hear, though, how you're thinking of this as a story, even at just building a normal map. You're thinking of a story between these two rocks that are next to each other on this map.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think of it like that at all. I think that's a rock.
It's a rock, and that's which is the risk. Ones and zero.
Yeah.
You see the matrix. Right? That's all it is to you. And then past that point, the true fun begins, because we can start to go through a process of painting, because this is, like I say, it's only an indication. What we would be doing in Photoshop is using our maximize, minimize, and maximize on random shapes, which we painted in on black. Basically, it would expand and contract them, and we get an idea about where the concavities are based on the curvature. But in Photoshop, it would be high pass instead. This is just another filter. And then we start painting on it, do the artistic thing, and actually start some painting. So, I don't know. That's probably as much as there is.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see just how you sort of build that up over time. And then, of course, how you would use this, you just slap this on a mesh, don't you?
Yeah, because you're going to have everything from Substance Painter. You've got, because we're building in height, we've got a normal, we've got a height. It's going to go straight in. We've got an ambient occlusion. We have to build it ourselves, but it's there. And then we can do that painting, like traditional 2D painting over the top of it as well. So as a workflow, Not necessarily the most optimal because it's not procedural in the way that maybe sculpting and baking or going through that process is, but it's very similar. And you could certainly have maybe a little bit more fun doing it. And I think that is probably the most important thing.
Yes. Always remember to have fun with your games development. So what have we been doing today, Mike?
What have we been doing? We've been exploring Substance Painter and some of the options available. So instead of a traditional workflow, we've been having a look at a more constructional approach and how that ties into some more fun painting methods.
Yeah, it's been really nice to see how an artist goes around kind of this process of building up this normal map to chuck it on a mesh so that we can then use it inside of a game of some description.
Yeah, and obviously, if you'd like to know a little bit more, then there are further episodes of Developer Mode that you could be looking at right now.